sincerely hope that you are enjoying and have been enjoying since last night the programs that have been put on by the Conscience and Justice Council. And if it's just your first time or today, then we want to welcome you here. My name is Mark Brown, and I am the PARL leader, Public Affairs and Religious Liberty leader for Southeastern Conference. That's Southeastern in Florida, because there are two Southeastern conferences. There's one in California, and there is one in Florida. I'm also a member of the Conscience and Justice Council, and we are happy and excited to have you here. This session is going to be Justice or Just Us. Okay? This session in here is Justice or Just Us. Of course, justice is the principle or ideal of dealing with right or having right action. I'm going to invite you, please, to just bow your heads with me while we pray to begin our session. Father, we thank you for the blessings of today. We know that you're a God of justice. You're a God who believes and acts in a righteous way towards us. And Lord Jesus, we just ask that you will come down and tabernacle with us and speak through the speaker. And may we realize that we are not by ourselves. It's not just us, that you're on our side. Father, grant us your grace and your mercy and your peace. In Jesus' name, amen. Here to present or to introduce or to present to some of you the speaker of the morning is Pastor Everton Innes, and he will give you the introduction to the speaker.
Thank you so very much, Pastor Brown. Good morning, everyone. Pastor Innes, I'm the General Vice President and PARL Director for the South Atlantic Conference. We're headquartered in Decatur, Georgia. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce and to welcome to the podium Attorney Joseph C. McKenzie. He is barred and practices here in the state of Maryland. He also lectures at local colleges in the area of law. And one of the things I read about him from his bio is that he is very involved in helping to mentor up-and-coming attorneys and students in terms of selecting the areas of law that they will practice. Help me make welcome to the podium Attorney Joseph C. McKenzie.
Thank you so much, Minister. I appreciate it. Good morning. My name is Joseph McKenzie. Like the minister said, I do practice criminal law here in Maryland. And the reason why I went into this area is to help people. And I've always wanted to help people. I wanted to become a therapist, but I don't think I could help people being a therapist as much as I can be a lawyer. I want to talk about one of the biggest misconceptions we have about the criminal justice system. And this is just the beginning. If Mr. Edward Woods will have me again and again and again, we can expand. But I want to start from the beginning. And one of the things I want to start with is why people commit crimes and why people are in the criminal justice system. One of the things I'm gonna do to help me with this presentation, if you are military, law enforcement, or if you are in fact a minister, I may call on you to verify some things that I'm very familiar with and that I personally experience and I just may ask you to either verify or correct me, because I'm not a minister and I'm not in law enforcement, but I want to, I'm going to reference a couple of things in the Bible, and I'm going to reference a couple of things that happen in our society. Okay, so I'm just going to ask a couple of people to raise their hand and give me, between 5 and 10 words, or maybe even one word. What is the cause of crime in this country, in this culture? Can anybody tell me what they think from their perspective? What is the cause of crime, criminal activity? Anybody? Yes. Poverty. Okay. Somebody else? Okay. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Yes. Oppression. Okay. Okay. I like that response. I like poverty too, but you're getting a little closer. Yes, ma'am. Greed. Okay. Yes, Minister. Okay. There are so many different crimes. There are sexual crimes. There are financial crimes. There are mental health related crimes. There's crimes of competition. You'd be surprised how many people fight over a loved one. From anything from harassing over the internet or the phone, or to actually killing somebody else because of the love of somebody else. Okay, so poverty, greed, yes, Minister. Entitlement, okay. Okay. Yes, Mr. Woods. Perceived what? Be more specific. Perceived. Hello. What happened? Where am I?
You just went there. It's probably just sleeping.
That's mine. I don't think it's connected.
Okay, so there is.
That's my laptop. No. Is that the problem? Who's the, okay. So then I'll just yell. Mr. Woods, say that again. What did you say?
Perceived lack.
Perceived lack of?
Someone could feel like they lack resources. They can feel like they lack emotional support, love. They can feel like they're lacking food. They can feel like they're lacking what everyone else in society has, and therefore they seek to do something about what they perceive as their.
Okay. All right. So, poverty, unbeknownst to many of us, is not a cause of criminal activity. It is not the cause of most crimes. As a matter of fact, in today's society, if a prosecutor finds out that you're shoplifting because you're hungry, they will come to the defense attorney and say, this person is hungry, they were trying to get some food, we don't want to deal with that. That's not a crime. I remember one time there was a military vet who, I was in a jurisdiction where the prosecutor's office was very, very petty. Military vet did a couple of tours in Afghanistan, did a couple of tours in Iraq, and came back, and if you look at him, you could look at this man and tell that he's seen death. I didn't even have to ask him. I could tell that he's killed people. He's probably almost been killed several times. This man has seen hell. He was caught in Wegmans trying to get some food to eat. When the prosecutor announced the charge and started describing it, the judge rolled his eyes at the prosecutor so hard, I thought he was going to lock the prosecutor up. The judge was offended that they would bring this man in here for trying to eat. There is a perception in the criminal justice system that if you are stealing to feed yourself, it's not a crime. Statutorily, it's a crime, but we don't think it's a crime. The other one is prostitution. Because men run the criminal justice system, because men run the world, prostitution is not considered a crime. Now, for those who are well-read in the Bible, I don't even think Jesus tried to stop the criminal act of prostitution. I don't even know if it was a crime. But he intervened and he helped the woman, but did he take up efforts to stop the activity of prostitution? Yeah, prostitution and skirting and going around the law to feed oneself is really not considered a crime. The biggest reason for people to commit crimes in our culture is one word: inequality. You said oppression. That comes the closest. Sometimes the oppression is real and sometimes it's perceived. And in this discussion, I'm not going to talk about whether it's real or not. I'm going to talk about the perception. A sense of unfairness is it is the main cause of criminal activity. I'm going to touch upon a little bit on the difference between black inequities and white inequities. Traditionally, when one steals, especially if it's not for the purposes of feeding oneself, that is a horrible crime. I constantly tell my clients, there are two convictions you cannot have on your record if you expect to have a career in this society. One is sex offenses, particularly if they're against children. If you go to apply, even to Walmart, they don't want to touch you. If you have theft on your record, they don't want to touch you. For those of you who are here who are employers, how many of you would hire somebody who has a record of stealing? And you're running a for-profit business. I know some of you are in the ministry, so it is your job to hire the least of these. But for those of you who are running a profitable business or government, would you hire somebody who has on their record theft or molestation charges? Probably not. Let me ask you all something. Who's familiar with the story of the two thieves on the cross? Who's familiar with that? And I'm going to ask those who are well-read in the Bible to help me out with this. All right. In your readings of the Bible, I'm not going to ask for your research outside the Bible, but in your readings of the Bible, particularly the King James Version, does it ever talk about the crime that they actually committed? There's a label, but do they ever talk about the crime that would warrant the authorities to put these people up on a cross? And I don't have to get into the horrible, disgusting procedures that take place before they put up on a cross. Has anybody ever thought, before me bringing this up today, what crimes did those two guys commit? No, they were called thieves, but does the Bible talk about what crime they committed to get them to be put up on the cross? Because I don't think theft would warrant you being put up on the cross. You get punished, chopping off here and there, banned from the culture, but to be put to death Has anybody wondered? Okay, for the Bible scholars in here, has anybody done any research on the story of the two thieves on the cross outside of what's talked about in Luke and Mark? Is anybody familiar with what Luke and Mark refers to those two gentlemen on the cross other than the thief? Yes, ma'am. Exactly. The original, okay, so for those of you who are reading King James Bible, this is why I don't accept the King James Bible as, I know this is going to be blasphemy, I don't accept it as the gospel truth because it was translated by a European entity. So for those who know how to speak the original, you're going to read a total different story. The translation is they were anarchists. And an anarchist engages in insurrection. In my generation, Generation X, we called those people who rage against the machine. People who don't accept the presented authority. Why would they change the title of anarchist, insurrectionist, and there's two other labels that they have, rebel and revolutionaryist, if I may make that word up, revolutionaries? Why would they change those titles and make them thieves? Well, one, a thief is not an honorable person. When you are an anarchist, you're an insurrectionist, depending on who you're raging against, makes you a martyr, makes you a hero. Why would King James want to present the death penalty for somebody who's going against the government? That's what those two guys were. They were anti-government, they were freedom fighters, and they weren't part of the norm. And we're taught, who else was like that up there on the cross? Same guy, same thing. But they had to create those other two less than. So, nobody wants to be a thief. Nobody wants to be a bad person. So, somewhere between the original writings, I'm going to blame King James because he was a politician, and in translating the Bible, he needed to make sure no one was going to be an insurrectionist or an anarchist in his kingdom. Because if you read that story the way it is, you're a martyr, you're a hero, and you're going to go to paradise if you do such things. So he needed to change the narrative, and he did. But what does an anarchist, what is the motivation for an anarchist? Inequity, unfairness. And when the government is unfair, you want to rage against them and you want to fight them. You ever wonder why in Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and Cuba, there's almost no crime? There's a few, I want to get your perspective, and those of you who've traveled around the world, either to those countries or surrounding countries, why is there no crime in those countries? Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. But in countries where they even have the death penalty, that's not a deterrent for crime. Do you know why they don't have crime in those countries? Because there's no perception of inequality. And the rich are taxed heavily. There's wealthy people in Japan, South Korea, Cuba, but they're all equal. And the wealthy shares a large part of their wealth is shared with the haves and have-nots. In Japan, if you commit a crime and you go to jail, when you are released, you can't come back home. Your family disowns you because you dishonored our country. This is our country. We take great pride in it, and our country takes care of us. It is very common in Japan that if you go into an establishment, if you're not Japanese, they don't want you there. They will tell you you're not allowed here, and it's legal. Of course, any country you go to, if you are benefiting the local community, they'll let you in. But just tourists and a lot of establishments outside the tourist area, you're not allowed. In America, and I'm going to go with the black community, because it's not only in the black community, but it seems like everybody in here is black. Is there anybody who's not black in here? Raise your hand. It looks like everybody's black. Tell me if you are familiar with this cultural behavior. And those of you who are in the criminal justice system have seen this. When the young, is usually a man, when the young man is released, what do? He goes home, and then what happens?
He stays home. He can't get a job.
But what does the family do?
They welcome him. They celebrate.
They celebrate. They have a barbecue. There's a cookout. There is a cookout. There's praise. There's a lot of comments. You know, screw this justice system. You're home with us. Thank goodness you're home. Glad you're home. There's a welcoming. Because African Americans, since the time we stepped foot on this continent, have not felt that this country has been fair to us. So when our young people or older people go into the system, we can't wait till they get out, and we can't wait to surround them. And not only families, but it seems like other entities. The church comes around and surrounds them. And they're almost a hero, particularly if there's the perception that they were wrongfully convicted, which African Americans have the highest rate of exonerations in our criminal justice system. Even if the young man, young woman is guilty and committed the crime, there's still a sense of, we don't like this justice system. Even if it's on film that they did it. You know why? Because we know 9 times out of 10, when a black person commits a crime, the punishment is one way, and a white person does the same thing, there may not even be any jail. So there will always be a sense of, we don't want you to go to jail. This is why a lot of people don't understand. Well, why don't black people in African American communities, when the police come and try to do an investigation, why don't they tell? Why don't they cooperate? And there's this code of, we're not snitching. Because we know that, yes, Daquan did it, but we're not going to tell you. Because when you put the cuffs on him, you're not going to be fair. There's going to be inequities. There's no other group in this country that has experienced inequality and that does not have a sense of unfairness. Our resumes are superior to all other groups. And you know who knows that? You know who knows that even more than us? White people. They do. One of the main reasons, I remember when Barack Obama first came out, I couldn't pronounce his name. I said, who is this guy? Everybody knows Hillary's going to be the next president. Who's this little African guy? He has no cred with the civil rights movement, nothing. I remember when the black community was still saying, oh, this is us. We were saying, he speaks so well. And he's so articulate. And he's smooth. This is not the racist people. We were saying this. But we know, just like Jesse, just like Al, just like Shirley Chisholm, some of y'all don't know, Shirley Chisholm, when she announced, the media laughed at her in her face. We had this, this is nice. He's going to make us look good, and that guy could be our answer to somebody like Clarence Thomas. We were so happy, but we were like, we had this condescending attitude. And while we were doing that, I remember the first time he won in Iowa, where there's none of us. And him and his wife is on stage, and there were no other black people, just those two, and about 20,000 white people were cheering him on in the crowd saying, "This is our new guy." And do you know why white people in a state like Iowa or anywhere else where he went throughout the country said, that little African man is our hero? Is because for 8 years, the inequality, the injustice, and the just imbalance that George Bush created for progressive whites was overbearing. And whenever white people feel oppressed and they want somebody to come out and represent to the fullest extent their oppression, they choose a black face to do it. Barack Obama had way more qualified people running with him, but they chose him. Let me give you another example. You know how they're banning books that's been put out by African Americans? Rosa Parks, really? They are banning her book. Toni Morrison, the author of Caste, several other African American authors who've never done anything but just fight for justice, they're banning them. They're talking about critical race theory. But ever since I was a child, and those of you who are older than me, correct me if I'm wrong. Have you ever heard anything negative about Crispus Attucks? I'm going to start with him, and then I'm going to come down to present day. Has anybody heard anything negative about Crispus Attucks? Crispus Attucks was an African American guy, and what is he known for? On behalf of what group of people in this country? White people. They were feeling oppressed. And they loved the fact that an African American man who knows oppression thrice the times they know it took the first bullet. And he's been a hero ever since. Ever since. And throughout the debate on whether we should teach African American history, has anybody heard Crispus Attucks should be removed? There are Confederate generals. You probably don't know about this, but there are Confederate generals that after the Civil War, they saw we are on the wrong side of history. And a couple of them converted over and said, we need to help African Americans. Have any of you all heard of this? You're military, so you probably heard of it. But are they part of the narrative like Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson? Are they heroic? Are there streets named after them? Nope. Nope. If you're African American and you represent the oppression and the inequities of white people, they will love you. I remember when America, the congressional community, the Republican Congress people were sick of John Boehner. They couldn't stand him. He was too chummy with Barack Obama. They hated that. Remember they wanted to replace him? Boehner, yes. Do you remember when they had the vote? I remember it as clear as day. When they were voting to vote him out. Does anybody remember the votes that they were putting forth to take his place? And they didn't even do it silently. They yelled it out. When they were doing the votes, they were yelling out Allen West. Allen West is a military person. He's an African-American man. And they were yelling out the name Colin Powell. They didn't want John Boehner. And these, remember I said perceived oppression and real oppression. We are not white, male, because that's who the Republican Party was made up in Congress, majority, but they felt oppressed. They felt that John Boehner was giving in to this liberal, skinny African guy, and that they felt oppressed. So they yelled out in protest, Colin Powell, Allen West, when they were counting the votes. Do y'all remember the last coup that was trying to take place when they were trying to oust McCarthy? Speaker McCarthy? Just in January, Hakeem Jeffries was for the Democrats. McCarthy was for the Republicans. I forgot his first name. Kevin McCarthy, first name. On the fourth round, do you remember who they put up to go up against Hakeem Jeffries because they hated him so much? And of course, McCarthy does not have a resume of oppression, and he can't speak to inequities. They tried to get Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan didn't want it. Did y'all notice who they put up front? That's right. Byron Donalds. Big. He's 6'2", 263 pounds. Dark-skinned guy. Not the type of guy that probably any of us would want to walk past in an alley at midnight. Very intimidating guy. They said, we're going to put him up. And they actually, without knowing it, made history because you had two African-American men, and they both got the most votes to be Speaker of the House for the first time in the history of this country. But did they seriously put him up there because they really wanted him as their leader? Why did they put him up there? They wanted a black face to show we are an oppressed people. We don't like this. We don't like the majority from the past. We're raging against Nancy Pelosi. We're raging against this new African-American guy, Hakeem Jeffries. We're raging against Joe Biden. Let's put up the face that would make us present to the world we are oppressed. They do it all the time. How many people is everybody in here religious and Christian? Everybody? Okay. Some people are not nodding. Okay. How many people took out a minute of silence in prayer when you found out that there were 4 or 5 billionaires going down in the wreckage to go see the Titanic, and as you were hearing that they may not come back up, and then as more time went on, they weren't going to come back up? How many of you all stopped and took a moment of silence to remember them? Excuse me? You did not. Okay. How many people did? You did, Minister. Okay. All right. And I understand that. But let me ask you something, Minister. When you did that, did you feel the same type of sorrow that you felt when George Floyd lost his life? Did you feel the same sense of, I don't want to put you on, I'm going to strike that. But other than the minister, and I expect, again, ministers are held to a different standard, I didn't see anybody else's hand. Yes. Uh-huh.
When I saw George Floyd, it brought me to tears. When that submarine went down, I felt nothing. They have money. They went on a trip.
They made a choice to do that. And they had enough money and resources to investigate and do a statistical analysis on the risk that they were taking. But they said, I want to do this anyway. I think there's a bigger sense of shame and a bigger sense of empathy when somebody tragically falls to the horror of death when it's not their fault or it's because of their condition, rather than somebody making a outward choice to put themselves at that risk. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a different type of oppression. Who remembers the Clive Bundy Ranch standoff? Remember the ranch standoff in Nevada where Clive Bundy did not want to remove his cattle off of the federal land. And they sent heavily armed federal agents to remove him. And people who felt, along with Clive and Bundy, that this was one of the most oppressive acts from the government. They showed up armed, they showed up heavily armed. And they even said, if we need to put our children and our women on the front lines to show the world what you're doing to us, we will do that. And who remembers what happened? The federal government armed agents backed down and they went away because they sympathized with them. They saw that these were oppressed people. They could relate to them, and they backed off. How many people think that if it was a bunch of black people, they would have done the same thing? Because they don't see our oppression. They don't see what we feel and what we've defined as inequities to be of their own. How many people in here, when you find out that the reason why they had people from all over the country come armed to rage against the government because they didn't want to move their cattle off of federal land and just have them graze on their own land, how many of you all feel that that warranted some type of oppression or inequities or anything like that? Or how many people in here can empathize or relate to that type of oppression? Nobody. Nobody has cattle. No one. Okay. All right. How many people remember January 6th? Now remember, perceived inequality versus reality. And I have my own opinion. I don't think that's oppression at all. To not be able to have your cattle graze over here. And one of the bases he said was, this is Nevada land. This is not federal land. Even though the federal government legally owned it, he said, this is Nevada land and it belongs to the people of Nevada. And he even used the race card. He says, I am Native American, partially. Now, if you look at him, he looks like, but this is my land, not yours. And again, who has the thickest resume of oppression and knowledge of inequality in this country? Guess who Clive and Bundy, who said, let me remind you what Clive and Bundy said, because he was a hero amongst Republicans. And after he said what I'm about to repeat, even Republicans said, no, we can't support you. He spoke about, I forgot what context it came up, but the topic of African Americans and slavery versus present day conditions of African Americans, he felt the need to speak on it. And he basically said African Americans were better off during slavery, and now that they're free, they're more enslaved because they all live off the government, they all receive freebies, and they are an oppressed people now. This is what he said. Republicans pulled back their support for him. But during the entire incident, in front of the cameras and all over the place, Does anybody remember this incident? It seems like I just have one person who remembers this. Who remembers this? Well, not a lot of people. Do you remember what his armed bodyguard, who he was? A black guy. And on his ranch, when the media came in, he had militia groups from all over the country, armed, coming there, and they brought their grievances there too. They were yelling and screaming, we don't want this government taking away our guns. We don't want this, we don't want that. And it was a sea of nothing but white militia people and Second Amendment rights activists all throughout his ranch. And they were all militarized up. They had these jumpsuits on, they had these cargo suits on, and it looked like they were ready to go to war. His bodyguard was a black guy. And when he went up to speak, he was standing right beside him. He felt that he was oppressed. He felt that the government was not treating him fairly, and he wanted that face to be shown. January 6th, the people of January 6th coming to the nation's capital. By the way, who lives here local? Where were you all? I know where I was, but I don't know why we didn't fight back, but I guess, I don't know. January 6th, yes, Minister. She did, because she knew what was coming. But we let these people from all over take over our city. That was wrong. All right, but who remembers when they were rushing the Capitol? Who remembers this? Police officers. Who remembers the gentlemen taking the flag and beating a police officer with the flag and the police flag over the head, almost killing him? How many people remember right after that, and even all the way up to this morning, massive police organizations coming out and condemning them? How many people remember that? No, I'm serious. Does anybody remember any police organizations or any police officers, not the Capitol Police, they're biased, but around the country? Okay, yeah, because when police officers have to wear masks when they're told to and they don't like it, you have mass police officers marching across saying that this is wrong. Did y'all see that during the pandemic? Some even retired out of protests. When a police officer is gunned down, you see how different police organizations from all over the country come. Just yesterday, a police organization called me on my cell phone and asked me if I would donate money to police officers who have fallen in the line of duty. How many people have gotten that call? How many people have gotten the call saying, we want to support the Capitol Police, who some were killed and some have PTSD, some had to retire, multitude of them were injured. We'd like for you to help them out. Have you gotten a call about that? No. Okay. By the way, when they called yesterday, they did this 2-minute presentation, and it sounded so wonderful. And I just simply asked them one question: do you support Black Lives Matter? And there was this silence. It was deadly. And then he said, you have a good day, sir. And that's how you get rid of people like that, if they're soliciting. That's a little advice for you. Those people had a perception of being oppressed. I don't care what you think their agenda is. I don't care how privileged you think they are. In their mindset, they felt the oppression that you're talking about. They felt it. Donald Trump felt it. How many people are surprised that after Donald Trump represented who he was, I think Maya Angelou said, when somebody tells you who they are, believe them? One thing we can say about Donald Trump, did Donald Trump ever hold back on who he was when he was running? When Donald Trump ran for the president, he said he was going to raise taxes on the rich so much that his friends would refuse to talk to him. He said he was going to bring our factories back home from China and Mexico and restore the bargaining power of unions. He said he was going to give everybody in America health insurance better than Obamacare at a lower cost. This is what Donald Trump said. And this is why Donald Trump, after 8 years of a Harvard professor who had one wife, never committed a crime, loving display of his love to his wife and his 2 children. He was the quintessential expression of what conservatives call the nuclear family. How many people are confused after 8 years of that, we went to Donald Trump? Donald Trump was smart enough, I know that's an oxymoron, but Donald Trump was smart enough to say, I'm going to talk about unfairness and inequities. I'm not going to talk about all the other things I could possibly talk about, but he honed in on inequities that affect his target audience. He even tried to cross over and go into the African Americans. African Americans, you can't even go outside without getting shot. What do you have to lose? We didn't, for the most part, buy it. But Donald Trump was even applauded when he went on SNL and said, I am going to shut down the privileged people who take advantage of the tax system. And I know how to do it because I do it. And people lauded him. That was one of the things that got even some people from not from his community, from our community, to cross over and say, you know, he's honest. And I do want somebody to address that. Hillary's not addressing that. He was more articulate in mapping out and talking about inequality as it relates to the majority population, white European American community, better than Hillary did. Hillary had the black vote wrapped up. But he was more articulate than doing that. Donald Trump didn't even need a black face to cover him. He did it openly, and no other politician in such a raw fashion did it like he did, and that's why he got the votes. Even Bill Clinton. Remember when Bill Clinton got in trouble? And everybody was after him? The first thing he did is, and it was public, he called Jesse Jackson to the White House. That was a big thing. And then during his impeachment trial, he made sure. Who remembers his impeachment trial? Do you remember who he carted out in front of America to represent him? Remember Cheryl Mills, the African-American female? And remember the other gentleman who was in the wheelchair? No, he started hanging out more with Vernon Jordan too, but the lawyers who were on the floor representing him during the impeachment trial, he had an African-American female and he had another gentleman who was in a wheelchair. And even the media caught that. They said, Bill Clinton is a genius, he knows what he's doing. He's choosing Cheryl Mills from the black community for obvious reasons, and he's tapping into another group where they are unfairly treated and putting them out in front of America to say, look, woe is me. And he's meeting with Jesse Jackson. Woe is me. They don't have the cred. They don't have the resume to talk about unfairness and inequality the way African Americans do. Things are getting worse. Back in the 80s, CEOs used to live in the same communities as their employees. Their income was 30 or 40 times the average salary of their employees. Now it's it's in the hundreds and even in the thousands, and they don't live in the same community. That perception of the haves and have-nots growing, getting wider, causes people to commit more crimes, especially financial crimes. 3 people in this country have the same wealth as the bottom 50% of wealth in this country. So that indicates that the wealth is going further and further up, and those of us who during the Eisenhower administration, the middle class was always well over 50%. It's now below 50%. These are the things that are doing a couple of things to those of us who are truly on the receiving end of inequality. Of course, resorting to creative criminal activity. But another thing that's happening, there is a huge exodus amongst African Americans and Latinos. Many Latinos are building up their wealth here and they're returning home. Ghana has opened their doors. They said Ghana is the new Atlanta. The African American community is going back there. They are also going to Panama. They're also going to Costa Rica. And they're going to Mexico. I was in Mexico last year, September, a year ago. I thought I was in Africa. There are so many black people there. There are so many white people there. I talked to the local people and they said there's massive communities from America, all races, living in Mexico. One, the economics here are horrible. 2, at least for African Americans, many have gone and left the country because after January 6th and after George Floyd, a lot of people got afraid. And a lot of people who've been stopped, roughed up, and beat up by the police, they're leaving. I have to admit, I'm a criminal defense attorney. I know my rights. I know what I can get away with. I know what the authorities can get away with and what they can't get away with. But I was scared. It's become increasingly an unsafe place to live because the desperations of people are increasing. There's also an exodus of African Americans leaving the Democratic Party, which is okay, but they're joining the Republican Party and they're supporting Trump. They said African American men are the #1 group of people doing this. And I believe one of the main reasons is because they don't feel like their party is addressing inequities like the Republican Party is. But what they falsely don't realize is that while Donald Trump is up there bragging on SNL about how I use the system, I'm going to change it, didn't change it, he is now in trouble for everything he said on SNL. He can no longer do business in New York. He's been found to be fraudulent in everything he did. He's boosted up his wealth so that he could get loans, and he downgraded his wealth so he can get tax help. And that has got him in the hot seat. And I wouldn't be surprised that around this country, they're choosing African Americans and African American women to go after one of the most powerful, greedy, law-breaking individuals in this country. Because I think they know you all understand inequity, you all understand injustice, go after this guy who's oppressing all Americans. Okay, I think I've been talking long enough. I don't know, am I on a timer? Do I do questions and answers? I don't know, I'm new. What do I do? Okay, any comments, questions of anything about inequity, the criminal justice system?
Could you address the fact, when growing up in high school, I learned government and economics and U.S. history. And the government, economics, and U.S. history. In U.S. history, I learned about, and I want you to address this, manifest destiny is what January 6th was all about.
Okay, be more specific. You want me to address why it took place or what the goal was? Manifest destiny. I've heard that in different contexts. Be more specific. Is that a movement?
Manifest destiny is the belief that the white male has the God-given right to rule the world as it relates to January 6th.
Okay, you remember, yeah, okay, you just mean the Republican Party. Okay, yeah, all right, yes. That is a real thing, and that is why when two things happened. When Barack Obama became president, the gun industry soared 400%. Militia groups spread out, and I don't even think, FBI has this accounting, they don't know how many there are. And during the Obama years, the statistics of anti-black crime, like 9 to 10 times more than any other racial group or ethnic group, LGBTQ groups, was against African Americans. The January 6th was a reflection about, it was more than just, you all stole this election. There are millions of people in this country who genuinely feel that that election was legitimately stolen. And what that equates to, that's inequity. That's oppression. I need to fight out against that. But also mixed in there is, I thought from my parents' generation, I'm speaking as a white person, I really shouldn't, but I thought from my parents' generation and the future from my children, we were going to be the majority. We're going to be in charge. We are going to rule the world. We are going to dominate. That's not happening. Our numbers are dwindling. Our participation in government is dwindling. Our young people graduating from high school and college are not supporting the values that we traditionally hold true. Nuclear family, man, woman. Our young kids are now getting into, well, you know, the pronouns. You can't call that person a guy or a girl. You have to ask them first. Or love is love. Conservatives don't want to see that, but that's what Generation Z is doing. The traditional values, it's not just race, it's traditional values with the majority have been nuclear family, Christianity, pronouns are only 2, and God forbid, honey, do not date outside your race, keep the culture, keep the community pure. All of that is changing, and it has the traditionalists upset. They're angry. They feel oppressed. So they do, the only thing they know how to do is retaliate. Our African Americans and young people's voting rights are more compromised and more vulnerable than they've ever been before. We're going backwards. They're trying to, through the back door, slide in poll taxes. They're trying to raise the age of voting. Vivek, how's his name? Vivek Shamami, yes. He, who said he does not like Juneteenth and will eradicate it, he said he's going to raise the voting age north of 18, maybe 25, because the young people don't know what they're doing. But what that is because he sees a new generation coming up who's not going to adhere to the traditional values. And he's fighting, along with other people like him, are fighting against that. Yes, Minister.
I've been in a conversation of two white men that said they've stopped watching the NFL because they've become woke. And this seems to be the sentiment of so many who started this woke language, because we don't really talk about, hey, stay woke like we used to. So where is that starting?
Woke is one of the most, again, I have my own, we all have our personal opinions about what's oppressive. But to many white people, woke is an extremely oppressive culture, concept, and activity. That's why in the United States, we're supposed to have the most democracy-having entity. We're banning books. And the leader of that is Ron DeSantis. He hates wokeness. What'd you say? DeSanctimonious, yes, yes. And no one is happier to see those two go at it. But the woke culture means people who don't shut up and stay in their place. Remember that when they said, LeBron, shut up and dribble? People who don't shut up and stay in their lane are automatically woke. I don't know where or how they hijacked that term from us, but Bakari, who comes on CNN, he's from, what's his name? Sellers. He did a historical analysis of woke, and it came out about over 100 years ago. African Americans used it, and it had a specific meaning, and it applied to us. But now, woke means if you want to tell your 9-year-old boy, you can be a girl, and we're going to give you the hormones to change yourself to be a girl. We're going to call you a girl. We're going to dress you up in girl clothing, and you just be a girl. That's now woke. Supporting Black Lives Matter, that's woke. Defunding corruption in the police department. I don't know why they don't articulate, just defund the police, defund the police. No, it's defund the corruption and defund the support of not allowing other police departments to know that when this person here shot an unarmed black guy and he got a slap on the wrist and he got fired, the other department in the next state over should know that. That's not what's happening here. Or when you've been sued and you have a judgment against you for sexually assaulting multiple women, mostly prostitutes, and you leave the department, you can get a job somewhere else. Defund that type of police. To want that is woke. To want equality is woke. But for us, equality is not the same. From my perspective, when I see black inequality, I see unfairness that involves the welfare and the well-being of black and Latino people. And I apologize for leaving this out, because as a criminal defense attorney, I'm starting to see this too. You know, I get so, I'm so caught up into being in the African American community. There is a large European white American community who has fallen prey to the criminal justice system. They are exploited in the workplace also. And when they perceive that their welfare and their well-being is being oppressed, you see a lot of them in court. White inequalities, from my perspective, is when their privilege is being attacked. That's what January 6th was all about. But anything that infringes on their privilege is called woke. And it's not I don't think it is. But where did white privilege come from? Where did white entitlement come from? Where did wealthy privilege come from? Where did wealth entitlement come from? Where does all that come from? Wherever it comes from, they have it. It's their reality. And when it's being attacked, it's a real thing. And let us not forget, I'm, as a criminal defense attorney, the majority of my clients are impoverished, and their income, their culture, their education cannot touch the average person in this. And there's a perception amongst the lower economic African Americans who would look at us and say, you people are privileged and we don't like you. And you people are part of, and the reason why there's inequity amongst us. We have to remember that too. And it's not only, it's an economic differentiation. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you for giving me the chance to talk to you all and address the reason for crime. In the years to come, if Mr. Woods would have me back, I will talk about actual crime. And there's a lot of misperceptions in our community. We disproportionately represent people who are incarcerated, but we disproportionately represent people who are exonerated. Many of us who are locked up and part of the criminal justice system, it's for nonviolent offenses. In years to come, I want to talk about the whole term black on black crime, where that came from. That did not come from us, and what that means, and how false, the false perception that surrounds that. And another thing I want to talk about is a concept that's called adultification that is involved with us. That's where you take a 12 or 13-year-old child and you treat him as an adult in the criminal justice system, as opposed to you take the same 12-year-old child of another race and their children, and how the media and how the criminal justice system calls African-American children male or man when they're not. But if it's a white person, they will call them child, and they will treat them as a child. Those are huge inequities within the criminal justice system I'll be talking about down the road. But thank you for your time. Appreciate it.